You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome to another edition of McGuire Mondays on the Toronto Sports Rush channel, brought to you by the Bet Rivers Network. Before we begin, I'd like to take a second to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave us a comment so that we can continue to bring you the best shows with the best guests, which, of course, leads me into today. My name is Kyle Andrew, and I am joined by the man himself, Mr. Pierre McGuire. Pierre, how are things down in Florida?
So fantastic, Kyle. So nice to visit with you. Getting ready for Game 3 tonight down here in Sunrise, Florida. Obviously, it's been a series to remember through the first two games anyways. And I can't wait to talk about it with you and the viewers. Can't wait.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because they got the extra day off here. They've got 2 days off, but I think the fans needed the 2 days off from that. We played almost 3 games of hockey, I think, in total here, and it's so evenly matched and it's so tight. What are you seeing out there through 2 games?
In game number 1, Evander Kane made a huge impact because of his physicality. He had 9 hits in game number 1. He totally pushed the Florida Panthers back on their heels. Kyle, I've done every single Panther game this playoff season, including a lot with you during the Toronto-Florida series. I never saw Florida on their heels like I saw them in game 1, especially in the third period and into overtime, because I do think Evander Kane made a difference in game 1. In game 2, you saw the script flipped. They went after Evander Kane. They hit him. And now I know he had 8 hits in the game, and I know he did some good stuff physically, but they took his ability to inflict pain away from him in game 2. I thought Bobrovsky was outstanding in game 2, especially at key times. Face-off play has been so one-sided in favor of Florida through the first 2 games. That's taken away some of the puck possession game from the Edmonton Oilers. It's been 56-44 combined through the first 2 games. That's an unbelievable stat in playoff hockey. Yes. So I've seen a lot. The biggest thing, though, and you've seen it, and I know how much you care, and I've seen it, I know how much I respect it. This Connor McDavid, in all of my career, 35 years working in the NHL, and I've been a fan. My first game was 1965 in Old Madison Square Garden. I have never seen a player do what he does, ever.
Pierre, I've never been a huge fan of comparing the past to comparing now. I mean, they have different equipment, they have different training, they eat differently, they do all that stuff. But the eyeball test on this is we haven't seen a player this obviously better than his peers since Wayne Gretzky. There's this, but he's also playing right next to one of the other best 5 guys in the league. It's crazy what the combination of him and Draisaitl have done, and we'll get to that. But McDavid alone, you know, this is a Toronto Sports Rush show, but we can't avoid the Stanley Cup, and we're talking about the best players in the Leafs and stuff. Conor McGregor is the best player on a team. He's the best player in the NHL, and he's performing as a best player should. Something a team like the Leafs have lacked, something they haven't been able to produce. But he's just getting better and better and superhuman as every game goes past.
You know what's really cool? And he's a Toronto guy, too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's an Ontario Hockey League guy. Played for the Erie Otters. Actually played for Chris Knobloch. Connor Brown was one of his line mates. I mean, they've taken the Erie Otters in the Ontario Hockey League and they've put it into the Edmonton Oilers. You know, you think about Evan Bouchard, a London Knight. You think about Corey Perry, a London Knight. You know, the list goes on and on. The influence of the Ontario Hockey League and the GTHL in particular with the Edmonton Oilers has been pretty spectacular. Jeff Jackson, Stan Bowman, Chris Knobloch, Paul Coffey, they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, Jackson's a product of that. Knobloch's, even though he's a Western guy coaching the Ontario Hockey League, Stan Bowman's from Buffalo, New York. He's very familiar with the Ontario Hockey League. When he was with the Chicago Blackhawks, they drafted Patrick Kane number 1 overall out of the London Knights. I can go down the line. The tie-ins are pretty amazing. So, you know, you talk about Connor McDavid, Kyle, you're so spot on. I had a chance to talk to Mario Lemieux the other day. And, you know, when you had the privilege of working and coaching and winning with somebody like that, it's pretty amazing. And I had that opportunity and privilege. And we were talking about Connor McDavid. And he said, Pierre, in all my years, I've never seen anything like this. He's not disparaging any of the other great players. He's not disparaging Jean Beliveau or Gordie Howe or Wayne Gretzky or Nathan McKinnon or Sidney Crosby. Not disparaging them at all. He's saying, I've never seen anybody do this at this level with this kind of speed.
It's incredible because, I mean, I just made the Gretzky reference earlier, but, you know, in my age bracket and growing up, dollar to dollar, to me, Mario Lemieux was the best hockey player I ever saw play. He didn't amass the numbers for so many reasons related to health and just different era and stuff like that. But until I saw Connor McDavid, Mario Lemieux was the best player I had seen with my own two eyes play hockey. And now to watch what McDavid is doing in a game, like Lemieux and Gretzky played back when the goalies were wearing loaves of Wonder Bread on their legs as pads, and there were some guys on the team that were there just to throw fists, and they were kind of like a little bit like pylons. The worst player on a team in the NHL now would have been one of the best players in the early 90s, late 80s. That's how far the game's come, and he is playing just at a superhuman level. Like we saw it the other night when they were arguing the panel about when he threw that pass out in front, whether he skipped a guy to see it coming, him coming in from the point. Like he's seeing the game at a different speed and a different level, and not only that, his movements are actually corroborating with the speed at which he's seeing the game. It's incredible.
What's going to be interesting, and I'm so glad you brought up the peripheral vision aspect of it, because if you ask Wayne Gretzky, and I've done this before, Wayne, how'd you make that play? Couldn't tell you. You asked Mario Lemieux, how'd you make that play? Couldn't tell you. The great ones can't tell you because our peripheral vision is a gift. That's how they're able to see those things that most of us mere mortals can never see. It's all peripheral. It's like great quarterbacks in football, great point guards in basketball. If you did a test on all of them, they all have one thing in common. They all have unbelievable peripheral vision. And so I'm watching this player play, and I'm going, it's uncanny. It's unbelievable how amazing his peripheral vision is. And I guarantee you, Kyle, if you were to say him, how'd you know he was there? I couldn't tell you. Don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just there all the time. Yeah. And so we have to, let's kind of segue this into talking about the dynamic duel. Watching what him and Draisaitl have done. You know, a great article came out. I'm going to see if I still have it up here. I don't, so I'll skip it. Just comparing them to the great teammate playoff duos, which frankly, that conversation really does come back to a lot of what Edmonton did over the years. Of course, talking about Gretzky and Messier, and another season Gretzky and Glenn Anderson, but just watching what these two guys are doing, the way their games complement one another. And let's talk a little bit about their contribution as a pair, and we can even kind of take a lesson for the Leafs in superstar management, how they play together, because the Leafs themselves, they have comparable guys. They do. They have the firepower, but they're not sorting it out when it matters the same way. So first, tell me what you're seeing on the ice, these two as a unit, as a pair.
Draisaitl and McDavid are unbelievable. Now, the big test is going to come here in Game 3 tonight on Monday, because Florida gets last change. And they can load up with two different tandems on defense. You know, they can go with the big tandem if they want, with Nico Mikkel and Seth Jones, or they can go with Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling. Forsling's one of the best defenders, even though he's not a big person. He's one of the best defenders in the league. I don't know what they're going to do. And I also don't know if Florida's going to keep Draisaitl and McDavid together, because of obviously Florida getting last change. But when Edmonton does get last change, how great are these guys? I don't think it's wrong to say as good or better than Curry and Gretzky. I don't think it's wrong to say as good as Lemieux and Tocchet, or as good as Lemieux and Stevens, or as good as Lemieux and Jagr. I don't think that's out of the realm. The last group, those three guys I said, Lemieux and Recchi, Lemieux and Tocchet, Lemieux and Stevens, Lemieux and Jagr, I coached those guys. So I know what they were capable of. What I'm seeing with Draisaitl and McDavid is a whole other level. It's because of their speed. Draisaitl's size, I don't think he is ever reported big enough. He's a huge guy.
He's a big guy.
He's a big, and his ability to one-time pucks on Edmonton's right side, the defender's left side, is unbelievable. You know, he can score a lot like Mario, by the way. Mario could score standing behind the icing line. Leon Draisaitl can do the same thing because his arms are so darn long. That's almost an impossible player to guard against or defend against.
Yeah, and with that arm length and that reach length too, Austin often drawing the double team because of that, because of his ability to keep the puck away from a defender just that little bit longer with that reach. You draw the second guy in and it opens up the ice. Well, look who else is on the ice with him. Well, like any number of superstars.
Yeah, so what you're saying has got a lot of merit. I mean, I think about, for Edmonton fans, you know, Gretzky and Curry was pretty special. Messi and Anderson was pretty special. They could bring the heat. And, you know, it's interesting. Curry's in the Hall of Fame. Gretzky's in the Hall of Fame. Messi's in the Hall of Fame. Anderson's in the Hall of Fame. They're all four of those players in the Hall of Fame, you know. And I look at Pittsburgh. Lemieux's in the Hall of Fame. Jagr's not in yet, but when he retires, he's going to get in. Ronnie Francis is going to get in. Joey Mullen is already in. Or Ronnie's already in too. So, you know what I mean? You look at these upper echelon teams, they always have like 4 or 5 guys that end up being in the
Yeah.
Hall of Fame. You know, four
That's right.
forwards, 2D, or a goalie. It's amazing how that works. And I'm on the committee, so I can't say too much. And these guys are a long way away from being retired. I'd be hard pressed to think if everything stays the same that Draisaitl and McDavid aren't in the Hall of Fame someday. I'd be hard pressed to say that.
Yeah, I don't think you've I don't think you've done anything to your reputation there as far as giving away a secret. If these guys continue on that path, they're going to have a plaque in the open entrance. The thing, so let's keep on the series right now. I want to turn it back to Florida a little bit, and something that you had alluded to earlier, because while we're talking about the main strengths of Edmonton right now, we can't obviously discount Skinner's play. He's done his job. He's exceeded his job. He was excellent in Game 1. He was a big part of that win, if not the main piece in Game 1. He's been great. But let's go to Florida, and you alluded to this earlier. Paul Maurice's ability to make adjustments on the fly, to change things, because in order for Florida to match up with this Edmonton team, they can't go at them with the same level of firepower, though Florida has plenty, but nobody can go at Edmonton that way. Paul Maurice's ability to adjust, like just looking on Bet Rivers right now, you did a show with Julie last week, and you guys talked about the odds. They've barely moved through 2 games. They flipped only slightly, but minus 120 Florida on Bet Rivers, minus 103 Edmonton, the future victory bet right now. That's as even as it gets, and it's almost identical to the way this opened.
I think last change is going to matter in Game 3. I'm not trying to influence the lines, but having stood in Paul Maurice's shoes and Sylvain Lefebvre's shoes and the coaching staff of Florida, they know they just can't line up and go the same way they did in Games 1 and 2. They can't. The margins are too fine. So it would be slanted towards Edmonton because of McDavid and Draisaitl, who we've been talking about. I would watch for big-time matchups, not just on the back end, but also up front. I think you're going to see a whole lot of nasty behavior from Florida. They've got to do it without taking penalties. If they take 4 penalties or more, they're going to be in trouble because that Edmonton power play is so good. So I would look for Florida to try to create almost a street fight environment through the first 10 to 12 minutes of the game to try to break some of those better players. And I don't mean break in terms of hurt them, but break in terms of taking away their speed and their skill level. That's what they call it in the coaching business. So I don't know if they'll do it or not, but I know Paul pretty well, and I've watched him coach for a long time. I think you're going to see a very industrious, in-your-face, hard Florida Panther team tonight in Game 3, and I think that'll be hard for Edmonton to overcome.
Well, it's definitely their path of victory here. You don't want to try and out-snipe the kings of the sniping themselves, and you just don't want to play their game. Every time Florida can turn a team on its ass and play their brand of hockey in their game, they win, and they win against these high firepower teams like the Maple Leafs and whatnot. And it is, as you say, because of their ability to take advantage of the advantages that go with home ice. In their case, they also have a raucous building. The crowd, we could get into it all night. That crowd out in Edmonton, aren't they special? Are they not special? They are. It's so fantastic to watch them get behind their team, and it is a smaller community, and they have just the Oilers and the Eskimos kind of going for them out there, and you can see the love. It's really fantastic. But they're back in Florida, and there's a raucous building facing the Oilers on the road tonight too. I want to shift briefly to the other side of the locker room where all the painkillers are and the old guys hang out, because the contributions from the older guys on these teams right now, Corey Perry, Brad Marchand, talk about what we're seeing from these battle-hardened warriors. There's no other way to describe them.
Well, I can't say enough about Corey. My first exposure to Corey would have been 2005. He was the last player to make the 05 World Junior team. And the way he made the team was Wayne Gretzky called Gord Miller. I'm not kidding you. We were in Winnipeg at the arena, and it was getting ready for the last pre-tournament game. And Corey didn't look like he was going to make the team. It was a stacked team, obviously. That was a nuclear winter with no NHL hockey, so all the best players were there for Canada. And Gretzky said to Gord and I, "How's Corey Perry doing?" And we're like, borderline, might not make it. So he says, "Get Corey on the phone." So Gord went down to the dressing room and gave Wayne Gretzky on the phone to Corey Perry. And Gretz gave him a huge pep talk. Corey, I think, had 2 or 3 goals in that last pre-tournament game. He makes the team, plays on a line with Crosby and Bergeron. They dominate the whole freaking tournament. They dominate. And the rest is history. 2 years later, Ryan Getzlaf, who was a big part of that 05 World Junior team, and Corey Perry are winning the Stanley Cup in Anaheim in 2007. So you just see how things started to steamroll. But what I'll never forget about Corey, that '05 World Junior Gold was a Memorial Cup in London. I went to that. I covered it for TSN at the time. And what blew me away was how good he was, how tough he was, how big a difference maker he was, and what a gamer he was. And they beat Sidney Crosby's Rimouski Oceanic in the gold medal game, the final of the Memorial Cup. It was unbelievable. Perry was dominant. He was so good. And that's my first exposure to him. And to see him all these years later, it blows me away.
Still doing it.
Still doing it.
Just some people just
know.
know.
He's a hockey player. He loves to play.
Capital H hockey player. He really is. He loves to play, and he's just got that thing where he understands big moments and how to win, and he has that extra gear. Brad Marchand, another one who has, you see these guys' names constantly in finals, in gold medal games. When the chips are down, they're on the ice, they're on the scoreboard, they're on the score sheet. Brad Marchand's another one, and it's so hard to talk favorably about him on a Toronto sports channel, but at some point we have to put the anger aside and just acknowledge the greatness that he has been throughout his career.
I think one of the best things that ever happened to Brad Marchand was being a Boston Bruin, but being around Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron early in his career, and Mark Recchi. I was doing a lot of Bruins games back in those days, and I did every game in the 2011 run for the Bruins to the Stanley Cup. And I know Leaf fans don't like that, but that's just the reality. I was working for an American network. And what was mind-shattering about that is Brad did not have great behavior on and off the ice. And I remember Mark Recchi grabbing him in Vancouver one day during a game and saying, hey, sit down, button up, and pay attention to what the coach is saying. What you see in a TV timeout between the two benches doesn't matter here. We're in the Stanley Cup final. Brad really responded to that. It was amazing the respect he had for his elders. They eventually win a Game 7 in the 2011 final in Vancouver. He was a major reason why. I mean, if you look at that entire Bruins team, yes, Tim Thomas was great. Yes, Zdeno Chara was great. I know how great Bergeron was. But the depth players, and back then Brad was one of the depth players with Gregory Campbell, with Danny Pye, with Sean Thornton. You go look at all those guys. Brad was one of those guys, and he made a massive difference, and I think he learned a ton from that, a ton.
Yeah, and so now we've covered these two battle-hardened veterans in the NHL right now, and I want to tie this very briefly back to the Leafs and talk about their off-season situation, because they do have good, and I won't go higher than that, in a grade, veteran leadership. They have, John Tavares has got a lot of kilometers on the odometer in the NHL. He's seen a lot of things, but what they don't have is a Corey Perry, is a Marchand, who have multiple rings and multiple medals and all of the resume points to pull guys by the scruff, like the way Recchi did for Marchand all these years, and go, hey, there's another gear here, and we have to find it tonight. Because if you've never been there, how can you coach others to get there? It's a very complicated situation for the Leafs. Where can they find someone like this who is that ultimate voice of veteran leadership in the locker room?
Oh, man, just bottle what you just said, Kyle. That was so good, so strong, and so appropriate. Everybody dreams about being in the Stanley Cup final, but until you've been there, I can tell you, I was one of those dreamers, and then you get there, you're like, oh, man, this is way different than what my dream was. This is way different. And so the second time around, you're usually better. And if you get to go 3 and 4 times, you're even better. But the first time, it's freeze frame, and it's really different. Could the Leafs use somebody like a Corey Perry, a Brad Marchand? Yeah, they could. I think JT, Johnny Tavares, could potentially be one of those guys, but he hasn't really been to the final. You don't know. Austin's never been to the final. Mitchell's never been to the final. Matthew Nyes has never been to the final. So, I mean, you start looking at it and you say, okay, we need somebody that can identify to having been to the final and know the trials and tribulations of it. I think there's room to add players like that to Toronto's roster. Let's see what they do. I hate to say it because it's painful for Toronto fans. Zach Hyman would have been that guy. Zach Hyman would have been that guy. And I'm not trying to start a fight with anybody. I'm just telling you, I was working in Ottawa when Zach Hyman went to market. Trust me, we wanted Zach Hyman.
It might be painful for them.
I can't believe he was not signed by it. To this day, I still can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so now we can tie this back to the series at hand right now. We're talking about having not been there. It's like you can't pretend to know what that feels like, but now just about every member of the Oilers roster, they did lose a Game 7 last year. They lost a Game 7 they almost had no business being in the first place because they were down 3-0. That's a lot of character building in one series, and then that's a long season this year to think about that. And now here they are again, and one thing we're seeing highlighted with them, they do seem to be managing their emotions and the internal drama that goes with a deep playoff run well. Like they lose a very, very tough overtime game after winning a very dramatic first game. And they're really separating these games game to game. They're not building as big of a hill out of each win or loss. They let it go no matter what happens and they move on. And that's the type of experience, or that's the type of forward-looking procedure that you can only get from the experience of the previous year, correct?
Oh my gosh, it's so well said again. And I'll give you an example. Again, I'm not trying to pick on the Leafs here. John Klingberg used to be part of the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. He actually had Stanley Cup experience going to play in Dallas and going to the Stanley Cup final with the Dallas Stars. Now, I know they lost to Tampa, but I was there covering it. And, Klingberg was an important part of that defense. He and Miro Heiskanen were elite members of that defense in Dallas at the time. He wasn't 100% when he went to Toronto. I get it. I totally get it. But you look at the guy playing now, he's got the experience of having been there. He has lost, yes, but he had the experience, and he can help them play because he can move the puck so well. It's pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, Pierre, it's almost fair to say, too, that arguably the only thing better than a Stanley Cup victory even experience is a Stanley Cup loss. Because the problem with the Leafs, the way I see it right now, too, is they don't have any players that have bled on the ice during the final. You know what I mean? And I mean that, I don't mean that literally. I mean that just to know what that feels like. And again, to tie this into the Leafs, we can look at an Oilers team and we can look at a Leafs team roster-wise, what we expect them to bring to the table, very similar types of setups. Tons of firepower, goaltending situation stable. They're a well-rounded hockey team that can explode for any minute. Why is it working for the Oilers? Why is it not working for the Leafs beyond the things we just discussed, beyond the experience points?
So I'll ask the question, who's the Evander Kane for the Toronto Maple Leafs? I don't know if they have that guy.
That's right.
Max Domi's a facsimile of that, but Max is nowhere near as big as Evander. Evander's a big man. He's a big man. Nice could be there. He could be him. Yeah, but he's a younger guy who's playing with Austin. So his role is different. Like I can tell you right now, Game 1 for Edmonton, the win, was influenced by Evander Kane's 9 hits. And what he did, he targeted Aaron Ekblad. He went after him. He went after Barkov. I made a tape. I broke it down and showed it to the viewers here in the United States. It's savage in a good way. You want that kind of Toronto doesn't have that guy. They don't have that guy. Like Evander really made a difference. And I think all the depth players in Edmonton understand their role. I'm not sure all the depth players in Toronto still understand their role. Yeah. And I think that's part of why, Florida loaded up on. So I'll give you an example. When Game 3 started in Florida, in the Toronto-Florida series, Florida changed their fourth line. And they put on Jonah Gadjevich, they put on Tomas Nosek, who are big physical guys, and they put A.J. Greer. From the start of Game 3 to the end of Game 7, that fourth line outscored Austin Matthews, Mitchell Marner, and Matthew Nyes. Yeah. How did they do that? They weren't getting regular minutes against the top Toronto guys. They were beating up the depth players for Toronto. Yeah. That's what happened. And then you look at Luostarinen, you look at Marchand, and you look at Lundell. They had a field day. So this is where I'm saying I think the grunts, the down in the dirt, ground and pound guys, have to be better for Toronto. I think Toronto's got more than enough star power. They need to address their grunts, their hardworking, industrious, mean-spirited players.
And, I mean, we have to kind of revisit everything now, too, because obviously it was just a disaster as far as public perception goes for them to lose Game 7 again this year and to lose Games 5 and 7 the way they lost them and stuff. But now we've watched Florida absolutely roll through Carolina. We're watching them play at least level with Edmonton once again. Is Florida's continued progression through these playoffs kind of a way for the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base and the media and everything to step back and go, okay, but hold on. They lost to 1A or 1B best team in the NHL. maybe it's not full panic. And I'm not saying they don't need to make changes. They clearly need to make changes. And whether they need them or not, it seems like some changes are coming. They have not as much control over the Marner situation as people would like to think. And there's just changes coming. But is it less panic mode because of how Florida's performed?
Man, I love doing this with you. You're still right on, Cal. You should call Brad Treliving, because I wouldn't be panicking if I was Toronto. I said that on the Monday after they got eliminated. I wouldn't be in a rush to panic.
Yeah.
Because I do think there are a lot of good pieces there. I really do. But I do think they need to open their eyes, and I think their eyes are open. You heard Brad Treliving say we got to change a little bit of the DNA. I think those are the term that he used, DNA.
I like that. I like when he said that. A little bit.
So this is what I'm talking about. I think the back end, and I'm talking about the depth forwards in particular, that needs to be looked at. You can address that in free agency. Here's what I can tell Leaf fans. AJ Greer was drafted by Colorado. He's played in their organization, Boston's organization, and Calgary's organization. Now he's in Florida. Okay? That's 3 teams before he got to Florida. Jonah Gadjevich, same kind of thing. Tomas Nosek, same kind. All those players can be had. But you have to make sure you identify the character issue that they all bring.
Yes.
This is not, I'm telling you, if you're an analytics person, don't get mad at me. I'm telling you the facts. None of those players are analytic players. They're eye test players. You need hard boots in the ground scouting to find those players. You can't do it on a computer screen.
Yeah, Pierre, honestly, and it's not, okay, we're a couple of older guys. Why? There's a time and a place for analytics. That's good to analyze games in hindsight, but when it comes to putting together a team in the formula, the pieces that the Leafs are missing right now are not measured on Google Sheets. It's measured, as you say, on the eyeball test and what they bring to a championship caliber team. So I just have this habit now of losing a light mid-show. That happened in my last show. It's okay. It's not that important of a light, but we will continue on with one last point, tying to the Leafs into a personnel situation in which they are sitting very pretty, but there's some discussion to be had here. They have 2 starting goaltenders. They have 2 starting goaltenders that they're paying very low bucks for right now. That means they have 2 starting goaltenders who are extremely valuable. Is it in their best interest to move one of those guys this summer while their value is still so high?
Great question and fair. And so here's how I'm going to answer it. If they think Dennis Hildeby can be the guy that can move up and replace, whether it's Anthony Stolarz, who's obviously older than Joseph Woll, or Joseph Woll, then I'd say probably to look at it and evaluate it. I do think they'd be able to keep Stolarz at a team-friendly contract because of his age, and I think he's really happy there.
Right.
Woll, I think, is a different story when he comes out of his contract. So I think that's something to measure. But here's the question I would ask my scouts if I were Brad Treliving. If we're going to do this, we're going to trade one of our goalies whose value is high, where do we have Hildeby? Because we can't go in with a 1A and a 2.
Right.
If Hildeby's seen as a 1B, then I'd say let's do it. But if he's seen as a 2 or less, I would say no, we're not doing it. So I think it comes down to this is where you have, and you know how they always say, well, we're having scouting meetings. A lot of those meetings are way more important than people think.
Right, yeah.
This would be one of those meetings that would be really important.
Yeah, it's like whispering mob talk. It's like, yeah, we're having a scouting meeting, but really what they're doing is they're looking at these deep issues. And the only reason I even brought that up is because there are some people that felt like the overall hand, maybe Marner should have been dealt last year while he still had higher value to them on the trade market and stuff. And with the contracts these guys are under, they will never be more valuable than they are in this offseason because they're going to get paid soon. They've both played more than visually capable of being a number one somewhere else. And it's just, the Leafs now have to be very careful about the timing of the moves they make.
So smart. Man, Kyle, you're having a good day.
Well, I tried a different coffee this morning, Pierre, and I think it's got me all perked up.
You're having a good day, man.
Well, it's so easy to evaluate the Leafs in hindsight. To me, it's a lot about the Florida performance. Personally, I'm just like, okay, as you say, it's DNA restructuring pieces. It's not an overhaul. They don't need to overhaul a team that just won that division, one of the best teams in the NHL with all that firepower. It's little changes, as you say, eyeball tests, not analytical tests, personnel, and they can build a team that can be right where Florida is next year.
So this is just for Leaf fans. Matthew Knies is one of the best young power forwards in the league. He is. Austin Matthews is one of the top centermen in the National Hockey League. He truly is. John Tavares, if he's your number 3, you got a pretty good center ice position. So now who's going to be your number 2? That's what you got to identify. Montreal's in the same boat. Montreal's good at 1. They're good at 3. They're good at 4. They don't have 2. So, you start, look around the league. There are a lot of teams that need a 2. You can't win a cup without an elite 2. So let's just use Florida as an example. Won the cup. 1 is Barkov, 2 is Bennett. 3 is Lundell.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they are where they are. In most real things, you look at, let's do Edmonton. McDavid is a 1. How about when Draisaitl plays center? He's there too. But if Draisaitl doesn't, you can move Nugent Hopkins down. If Nugent Hopkins is
right,
your 2, you're in a, and then Adam Henrique's your 3. You're in a, and then Matthias Janmark is your 4. If you follow me, this is what the Leafs don't have right now. So they have a 1. And I think if Johnny Tavares goes to 3, then I think things can really be balanced out well. But Toronto's a much better roster than people give them credit for. And what happens if they keep Mitchell Marner? What happens if Mitchell says, what? I want to stay. I like it here. Because I'm going to tell you right now, all these other teams that people say, he's going to go here, he's going to – you tell me who's better than Austin Matthews on those teams.
That's it. Like people forget about the point. Like Mitchell Marner has to think about his own legacy and who he's playing with.
Yes.
It's one thing to say he's going to move his young family to somewhere that affords him a better lifestyle and a better this and a better that. But it's another thing to think that this guy inside of him doesn't want to win, and he may not want to rebuild that connection with a new group of guys because he's scoring at an elite level where he is right now.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. This is so good. It's therapeutic for me too because I'm bullish on the Leafs. I think the roster is way better than people think.
So close.
And they are. That's the best term. They're this close. They're really tight. Close. I know people are ticked off still. I get it. They're way better than you think.
It's better to have a whole bunch of people ticked off than it is to have people apathetic in a hockey market that doesn't matter. This is just the cost of doing business in this Toronto market. And, to say they expect a winner, I think really this year what they expected was to lose 1 round later. I think that would have been the progress to them. And they missed it by a game. Again, you go back to that 3-1 lead and they could have been up 3-0 in that series. You go back to that little moment right there and they didn't look their worst then, but they did blow that game. And it just led to the catastrophe the way that series ended.
I think catastrophe is a good word because 5 and 7 were so bad. Games 5.
It was so terrible.
So if you're the coaching staff, and I guarantee you they've done this exercise with Keith Pelly, you break the tape down, you say they're very similar games. 5 and 7 are very similar. So what happened? And only you got to be in the room. And trust me, I've been through these exercises. They're not fun to go through, but they're important. It gets heated. It gets intense. There's a lot of challenging. Some guy may say, we weren't good enough in a power play. We weren't good enough in a penalty kill. We made bad decisions in our own zone coverage. We had guys playing hurt that shouldn't have been playing. There's so many things that go into those discussions that the fans would never know. But I can assure you of this. I was hired by Keith Pelly, and I worked for Keith Pelly for a long time in a lot of Olympic games, big moments. He's an intense guy, man. Yeah. He may not make all the hockey decisions, but he's going to hold the hockey decision makers' feet to the fire. It's no more, we're just here and we're Toronto and we're big names. That's not how it's going to work with this guy. I'm telling you right now. No way.
And I still believe a great pairing to that. And I still believe Berube is the right man for the job in Toronto. 100%. I think his attitude pairs well with what you just stated.
Yep.
And, he's had 1 season. Like, let's let that take some. I mean, and I get it, 1967, all that stuff, but you can't just keep comparing this roster to the roster that failed in the 90s or the 80s.
No.
At some point, you have to use your head a little bit and let the analytics do a little bit of the work here, saying things are different now, Pierre. So
I'd like to see him get a younger defenseman who can skate and move the puck. I'd like to see that be part of it, and I think it can be part of it. And I'd like to see an elite, grinding depth forward that can get 17 to 25 goals. And if they could do that, I think that'd make a big difference to their team. I really do.
I think so as well, Pierre. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, once again for tuning into Toronto Sports Rush here on the Bet Rivers Network. If you haven't already, please please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We're watching them constantly. It helps shape our content moving forward. My name is Kyle Andrew, once again joined on McGuire Mondays by Mr. Pierre McGuire himself. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.